Hello, Be International here, and today we're going to be going over how to replace your plunger seal. First, we need to get some tools ready. The tools that will be used for today's service is a torque wrench, a breaker bar, a 1 1/8 inch deep socket, a 1 7/8 crescent wrench, a 13/16 combo wrench, a 1/2 inch combo wrench, a 3/8 high pressure gland, a 3/8 high pressure plug, a Delrin ball, bronze bearing, plunger seal removal and installation tool, plunger seal installation and removal socket, and your new plunger seal. Almost all of these should be able to be found within your spare parts kit. If you do not have a torque wrench or a breaker bar, you can either shop locally or you can reach out to Be International and we can supply you with what you need. Now that we have our tools, the next step we need to do is identify whether your system is in parallel or reverse flow. If your system is in parallel flow, it will look similar to our system here. You will have a nipple or an outlet connection coming out the end of your EC. If it's in reverse flow, it will be coming out of the bottom of the EC, right where this gland and collar are, below your nozzle port. If your system is in reverse flow, you will need to get the connection out of your EC. Now we can start the disassembly of your high pressure cylinder. First, you will need to grab your 13/16 combo wrench, and we're going to loosen the long gland that attaches your 3-way valve to the high pressure cylinder. Once you loosen this gland, you should be able to fully undo the gland and remove your whole process section in one piece without having to fully disassemble it. So now that we have our process system removed, the next step is to drain your inlet reservoir. So what you're going to need is you're going to need to grab some sort of jug, container, so you can empty out your product or water into it. And you're going to loosen this clamp that attaches your inlet fitting to the elbow. Once you loosen it, you can tilt your reservoir over and dump everything in it. After that, we're just going to remove the reservoir. So you'll undo this clamp. Make sure not to lose your gasket. Now that you have your process system and your inlet reservoir assembly removed, we can start to disassemble your high pressure cylinder. You're going to need your breaker bar and the 1 1/8 socket tool. We're going to loosen these 4 nuts, and once we take them off, we'll be able to take off your inlet fitting and access the high pressure cylinder. When you remove your inlet fitting, there's going to be a ball, a spring, and a spring retainer touching the high pressure cylinder on the inside of your inlet fitting. Make sure when you take your inlet fitting off, you secure these pieces. Here's your spring retainer. Here's the spring. Here's the ball. When you remove your high pressure cylinder, you'll have a sealing surface right here, and this is where you will need to grab your MS-80132. This is a bearing that protects the sealing surface when you place it facing downwards. Now that we have the high pressure cylinder disassembled and off the machine, we can access the plunger seal. You'll need your 1 7/8 crescent wrench to crack your bearing retainer. Sometimes when you pull it off the machine, it might be hand loose, but you'll need that for when you retighten this. Inside the bearing retainer, you'll find your backup ring, your wedge, and your plunger seal. Grab your white Delrin ball, MS-80131, and drop it in. Take ST2 and ST11, your 3/8 high pressure gland and plug, and you'll put them in to where your three-way valve was when the high pressure cylinder was fully assembled. Take a little bit of water and pour it in. You probably want to pour it into a level about right around where your gland and plug are. You will take your plunger seal rod or your plunger seal installation tool, and you will take the smaller side and you will put it in. Now you're going to need to give it a little force, and when you press down, it'll cause the backup ring, wedge, and plunger seal to come off and onto this. Now that we have your plunger seal wedge, and backup ring removed from your high pressure cylinder, we can get to installing your new plunger seal. Just a note, when you remove your wedge and your backup ring, those are normally reusable. You just want to check them for any cracks or damages. If there are any cracks or damages, make sure to replace them. When installing your new plunger seal, you're going to have it facing open cup side down. You're going to grab your socket tool, which should be SP08780 in your spare parts kit. On the inside, there should be 2 steps. It's hard to see in the video, so for instructional purposes, I drew a black line to mark the smaller step. The smaller step, which takes about 25% of the socket, will go over your plunger seal. Firmly press down on that until you see that it is flush with the bottom. Next, you'll install your wedge, and I'll also add a photo at the end of this video to show how your wedge should be sitting on the plunger seal. Next, you're going to drop in your backup ring. Now that we have the plunger seal, wedge, and backup ring installed into the socket, we can almost put it into the high pressure cylinder. First, just make sure you take out your white Delrin ball, the water, and your 3/8 high pressure gland and plug from your high pressure cylinder. Once that's done, we can go ahead and install these. You'll drop the socket in with your plunger seal side facing downward. You'll grab your plunger seal installation tool, and you'll slowly but firmly press the stack into the high pressure cylinder. You want to make sure to do this slowly so you don't damage the OD of your plunger seal. Once that's set, you're just going to check to make sure there's a tiny little gap in between the backup ring and where the bottom of the bearing retainer sits. Now we'll take the bearing retainer and we'll reinstall it. After that, take your 1 7/8 crescent wrench and make sure to give it a little snug. So we have our high pressure cylinder back together. Now we can install it onto the plunger. You're going to insert the bearing retainer side of your high pressure cylinder onto the plunger and insert it into your isolator. Make sure to take off your bearing that was on the sealing surface side of your high pressure cylinder before you install your inlet fitting. Now take your inlet fitting and take the ball, spring, and spring retainer and insert them into the backside of your inlet fitting. Press on your spring retainer just to make sure you have a little bit of play. The spring retainer should go inside the sealing surface area of your high pressure cylinder. Now we're going to install our 4 washers and 4 nuts and retorque this. Now, grab your torque wrench and your 1 1/8 deep socket, and you're going to set your torque wrench to 80 foot-pounds. When you torque down your inlet fitting, make sure to torque down the nuts in a star pattern. On the back side of your inlet fitting and in between the high pressure cylinder, you should have even spacing. So now that we have our plunger seal changed and our high pressure cylinder reassembled, it's time to put on everything that we took off before. So we'll grab our inlet reservoir assembly, make sure not to forget the gasket, and we'll just clamp it right back on to the inlet fitting. Next, we'll grab our process system. And for reassembly, all we have to do is take our 3-way valve long gland, put it in the top of the high pressure cylinder, and tighten it up with a 13/16 wrench. Now that our process system is together, if you uninstalled any other of your options that were in reverse flow, make sure to attach those. Or if you're in parallel flow, or just had your outlet tube attached to the end, then you're all set to refill your reservoir, prime your system, and then once your system's primed, set your pressure, run at your set pressure, and check for leaks. And other than that, you're all set.